Thanks again for joining me on another episode of Quite Franklin. Today, my guest on the show is Dave Hollis. He's an author, podcast host, speaker, and coach. Now, on this episode, I'm probably going to start off a little jealous of Dave's fully restored 69 Bronco, but we quickly get into his recipe for success. He defines that as living up to your potential. And in his life, he identifies these 5 pillars by which he can improve himself. You know, we often hear about things like post-traumatic stress, but Dave talks about post-traumatic growth. And this is obviously coming at a time, 2020 was a tough year for everybody. And the trauma that we've all experienced from this year, and him personally, not just with everything else that's going on, but the things that are going on in his life and how he successfully came through that and used that struggle to growth in his life. As this episode went on, I thought to myself, wow, the people listening are getting some amazing information and you're getting it for free.
Quite frankly, it's kind of unusual.
It's quite Franklin.
Got it. Quite Franklin.
How are you, buddy?
I'm good, man. How are you doing, Dave?
I am doing well.
So you like my background?
You're in Singapore too? I do like your background, man. Jeez.
You're the first guest that I've had on that's actually said something about my background. I never talk about it. A quick little story. First of all, this movie, I probably watched this movie literally more than 100 times when I was about 14 years old. No kidding.
Yeah.
I've wasted so many human life hours on this thing. And then I actually met the real Frank Dukes. Like the real Frank Dukes in real life. He actually showed up at one of my seminars. Whole different story by itself. This looks like a little setup. You look like you're just at home right now, man. How you doing today?
Welcome to my master bedroom. This is like the place that I do most of the recordings for my podcast. It's easy, but also I have intermittently 4 humans that are walking in and out of my life with school coming in and out. And there's 2 people that are doing virtual school. So I'm like, you know what? Forget it. I'm going to go ahead and sit in my bedroom rather than sitting in the office today so that there's no interruptions. Thank you very much. But
you know where you should have recorded this podcast with me in your Bronco. We should have done a Bronco chat.
Also true.
Tell me about this Bronco actually.
So it's got a 302 under the hood, a little Mustang engine.
Yeah.
And well, here's the crazy thing. So I started building it about a year before I left the Walt Disney Company, in the midst of this midlife mess that I was stuck inside of, thinking that, if I could just get this Bronco, this is going to be the answer. Oh. And so it was the biggest midlife crisis-ish kind of impulsive thing. It took a ton of time, 18 months to build. And what's crazy is I always envisioned driving onto the lot where I was doing this work inside of the company that I'd worked for 17 years. And it was delivered 2 weeks after I quit. So it was delivered.
So you didn't even get to show off. You didn't get to show off the car.
I didn't even get to show off. I wanted to show off so bad, but I love it. It's also the loudest vehicle on the planet. And so like, if you want to take a call, I saw it as a date night vehicle. You can't have a single conversation in this baby. So it's kind of pointless in that respect, but it is fun.
Love the car, man. It's a beautiful piece. Did you do a full frame off restoration on that thing?
Yeah, I picked it up. I picked up an original 69 Bronco in Vegas.
Yeah.
I mean, I went kind of searching, where can I find? And it was rusted out, totally not running. It was just a piece of garbage, but it was there and shipped it to a place in Florida that actually restores. And so now, yes, I have a 69 Bronco, but maybe the only piece on the entire Bronco that is 69 is the VIN number. I mean, like truly every other piece has been taken out, replaced.
Resto mod and all that.
It's not old. Yeah.
Anyway, so what's going on today, man? How's your day going today?
So far, so good. I just got back from having had a quick trip into Arizona and California. I had an opportunity to speak on a stage that Tony Robbins and Dean Graziosi put together for a challenge. And so Dean has been a very, very close friend. He's operating out of Arizona. I happen to be seeing someone in Heidi Powell who's also living in Arizona. So it was a twofer. And then we ended up going into California because her grandma was having an 80th birthday party. I have a grandma who's 99, got a chance to have lunch with my parents. So it was like this very nice business and connecting to some people who could story tell a little bit of their perspective of having lived a much longer life. And so I got back yesterday and am here now in the grind with my 4 kids, got everyone off to school this morning, and I'm hanging out with you. So far, so good, man.
I'll tell you what, this is a great climax to a whole day, right? Hanging out with me,
That's exactly right. It's early here. So it's all down here from this.
Sorry, I ruined the rest of your day, man. My bad. Hey, so your grandma's 99, right? Yeah.
99 years old. We rolled into this place that she's staying. And one of the first things that she says is, hey, I just found this picture of me and my dad from when I was 18 months old. So she starts the conversation 98 years ago, and then just proceeds to kind of like storytell her having been born to Italian immigrants that went back to Italy as soon as she was born, then came back to the US, and like just kind of like walked us through. And most of the stories, to be honest, were hard. I mean, like she lived a dang life. And there was this beauty in, after an hour of storytelling where she's gone through all the things that she's been through, she said something that was just like so simple and pure. And that was that she never let the hard times steal her hope. And I was like, yo, like at 99, that's the kind of thing that you have perspective for, that maybe if we, in the midst of going through hard things, don't have the ability to necessarily see this decision that she made every single day, that she was not going to let the hard things compromise her having a good life. She was just like reveling in the fact that, man, I've had a good life. Even though she just told us like an hour's worth of really hard stories, she had this perspective that was like, I chose every day to see the good in the hard. It was not a thing that could compromise my hope. And I was like, yo, someone needs to hear that today. I need to hear that today, because there's plenty of times when I run into a hard time and I don't have the perspective of a 99-year-old person who's seen everything.
Oh, no. With her being 99, that would put her at about the age of 7 during when the Great Depression hit, right? Like when the collapse hit in 29. So she, as a young kid, experienced like that and the whole, early 30s and stuff until the economy got back on track. And that must have been a really tough time to grow up in. And it gives you a different kind of frame of reference to view things, because when life starts at a young age that difficult, it's kind of like it's only downhill from there. It just gets easier for people like that.
She was kind of regaling us in a tribute to her mother, a woman that I've never met and only have heard stories of, but like her dad was an alcoholic. Her dad was in and out of jobs. Her dad moved to the US and then back to Italy, and then left the family in Italy to come back to the US, and was, I'm going to guess, doing his best, but also not perfect, not ideal. And her mom, as the matriarch of this family, was the one who ended up moving the kids to America, finding a way to, without having any connecting tissue to anybody in the country, found a way to build a life for them. And what was interesting is that she then becomes someone who, as a veteran of war, who had to deal front row seat to mental illness with, my grandfather was someone who suffered from having schizophrenia. Like she had to end up going through some things that no one should have to necessarily go through, and ended up as a single mom of 5 kids, moving them across the country, as a person who had to deal with a son who ended up dying of cancer and a grandson who lost his life by suicide. Like she saw so many things that nobody, frankly, should ever have to see. But in some ways, because of the way that her mom modeled how to show up for the family, irrespective of the conditions that they were necessarily being faced with, she was herself someone who could step up for and live a life of integrity for the kids, even though things were harder than anyone would have necessarily hoped for. And I'm like, yo, this is like, what a beautiful testimony to the power of your mom. And what a beautiful thing to have modeled for my parents, for me, as a person who's been witness to the way that she's been strong in the face of so many crazy things.
So when picturing yourself at the age of 99, sitting there talking to your grandchildren, like, what do you think the theme of your story would be then?
It's so interesting you ask that, because in just the last 3 years, I really have used, I want to say visualization, but in a lot of times it's been negative visualization, because I have tried to create leverage for what my 60th birthday or 70th birthday or the video that plays at the end of my life at my funeral might look like. And I can see 2 totally different versions of how those toasts or that video end up coming together. One where I've chosen to show up for my life. I've lived into who I believe I was put on this planet to be, honoring the intention of my creator and doing things that would make these humans that might come together to celebrate my life proud. And I can see the opposite version where truly on the days when I'm struggling the most, I can tap into this vision of not living into who I know I need to be today to become the person I'd hope to be then. And that birthday party or that video, the birthday party thing is like something that is most resonant with me. I think of a 60th or 70th birthday party where my then adult children are invited to come around a table to toast the way that I have had an impact in their life, and for them to describe how they have pride for the decisions that I've made in showing up for my life. And in that version where I have created integrity every day between who I know I can be and the way I showed up in the last 24 hours, there's tears rolling down their faces as they're just overwhelmed by pride for the way that I showed up and modeled for them who I had hoped that they might become, in part for how I showed up for myself. But the alternative is a room that isn't full, a room that doesn't have all of my adult children even deciding to show up, or those that do struggling to find something to say. And that's paralyzing. I mean, that's the thing that gets my shoes on to go running on a day where I just don't feel like it. And I have plenty of those days, but I think each of us have to think a little bit about, like, how do we hope to have the people we care most about representing their appreciation for the way that we showed up for our lives when we get to 70, when we get to that. Like I had my brother-in-law passed away unexpectedly last year, and we were sitting at this memorial, and he was young. He's like 42, 43 years old. He's a prison guard. He was working a double shift, took a nap in his chair, didn't wake up, had a heart attack. And there was this beautiful montage video with some music that was playing at this ceremony. And we were just overwhelmed with grief for his family, for himself, for this loss. But also, I was very present with this idea that, man, one day there will be a video that's playing at my own memorial service. And the video, the pictures, the sentiment of that day is something that I am solely in control over. And so I now have to every single day decide how I'd hope for the videos and the pictures and the emotion of that day to play out. And I think that's on each of us. And if you have, there's a lot of people that can have a tapped into and have leverage for the positive vision of what they'd hope for. There's plenty of times though where that's just not enough. I have to tap into what it would feel like to have regret, what it would feel like to have let down my kids. I have 4 kids, and I want so badly to make them proud that I can connect to what the opposite of pride might feel like in a way that has me choosing positive coping mechanisms and pouring into myself with growth and spending time on my mental and emotional health and doing the work that would have me showing up in a way that would make them proud and would make me proud.
I'll tell you a story. When my dad passed away, I have my father. He has 4 children, and so is me. I 2 brothers and a sister, and we all have kind of somewhat similar views of him, but different views. Obviously, like if one of your children was to write your eulogy, it may have a certain tone to it. But if another one was to write your eulogy, it may have a completely different tone. My dad passed away. He was 56 years old. He had a heart attack suddenly, and I kind of knew that he had a lot of the risk factors, but I just didn't know that he was that close. But nonetheless, it came abruptly. And my dad was a nurse. He worked at a methadone clinic. And one of the doctors that worked at the clinic comes to me and he says, "Hey, Rich, I have several patients of your father's that are asking if they can come to the funeral." And so initially I was like, yeah, I don't know. I didn't know if I wanted a lot of addicts that were trying to overcome this addiction being at my dad's funeral. I was like, I don't know, give me a day or two to think about this. I'll get back to you. And so ultimately when this ended up happening, I come back to the doctor that was a friend of mine, a friend of my dad's. And I said, you know what, if these people want to come and pay their respects to my father, by all means, I would love to have them at the funeral. And now my dad was like, he was kind of a rule by an iron fist type of man, like it was his way or the highway. And he was the king of his castle and a very impatient man. I have countless memories of working on a car with my father where I couldn't hand him a wrench fast enough. And man, I'll tell you what, for a Christian man, he definitely had a potty mouth at times. But But I mean, I learned a lot of good lessons from him as well in life. And, he was a good father, but you tend to focus on some of those things sometimes. Probably would have told some joking stories at that if I actually spoke at the funeral, but there were some people that showed up, some of his patients, and they pulled me aside and they're like, "Hey, Rich, I want to say sorry for your loss." I'm like, "Thank you." And like, "Listen, I want to let you know that like your father was such a big influence on me. He was one of the most patient men I ever met." And I was like, "Huh?" I'm like, "What?" And like, "Oh yeah, he was there every day for me." I'm like, "Wait a minute, you mean that guy right there?" And it was like time and time again, I had these patients telling these stories to me. And so it was amazing to me to see the different kind of person that somebody would get, because, with my dad, like I had this like strong guy who would, walk through fire if he had to provide for his family. But on the flip side of this, he had these patients and he was just the softest human being. And my dad was everything, like every antonym of soft that you could possibly think of would describe my father in my book. So it was really interesting to see people like that there. And, so when you're thinking about what's going on in your deathbed and who's speaking and the thoughts that are going on in the room, there's going to be, I'm sure, a lot of positivity, but a lot of an eclectic collection of those thoughts as well.
For sure. I mean, I just am finishing up my next book, and in one of the things that I dive into, the idea of like what people regret most is something I've been super focused on, because again, it acts as this like piece of leverage to try and catalyze the courage to actually do the things that you ought to do, or to like believe in yourself enough to actually chase the dreams or listen to your intuition, whatever it might be. There was this author who spent time as a hospice nurse. Like every day she was really close to people who were about to die, and ended up compiling something of a memoir of sorts of all of their regrets as they were about to die. And the number one regret that she ended up taking down as a part of her time with all of these people that were way closer to death than any of us are was that they all wished that they had the courage to live a life that was true to themselves and not the life that others expected of them. And what's interesting is, like, I think that there's so many times where when we worry about how we might be received at that dinner at 70, or the way that our reception at our funeral video might end up playing off, the question is, are you going to live true to yourself? I've been talking a lot lately about this idea of like, I know that I've been very intentionally and deliberately designed by a creator who had a plan. And that intention is something that I'm attempting to honor every single day. And if I can live closer to integrity with the actions of my day and the intention of my creator, I feel great about myself when I'm by myself. But when I get distracted by how I am supposed to be as a real man, or what society suggests I ought to do as this, or the worry of the judgment that might come from the opinions of other people, it creates this dissonance that ends up compromising my confidence and keeps me a little further away from the intention of why I'm on this planet. And I don't know, I kind of keep coming back to it, because everyone at the end of the day is looking for some sense of self and the ability to express fully who they are. That to me is like the definition of freedom. And yet there's so many stories that we've been fed, or structures that we live inside of, that would make us feel insecure for fully owning why we're on this planet or why we're here. And the more that I can stay connected to like, man, I don't want to end my life with that regret of having checked the boxes for society or my origin, or for what it might mean to be a good man or a strong man or whatever. I want to be who I was created to be. And maybe that sounds crazy, by the way, but like for me, that's like kind of like where it starts and ends.
I had a guest on my show. His name was Billy Allsbrooks, and he was an aspiring hip hop artist in the 90s and early 2000s. And he ended up leaving the industry, and he had grown up in church, but he ended up leaving the industry, really became a born again Christian, like got to know Christ when his father passed away in 2007. And now he does motivational talks, like faith-based motivational talks. And, I asked him in that like in that podcast, I said, well, how do you measure success? And he said, I measure success by how closely I'm living to the purpose by which God has put me on this planet. So, in your answer to that, kind of like, as you're talking about the creator, creating you with an intention for something, it kind of makes sense to me. But then, thinking about your book, like get out of your own way. When you talked about like one of your biggest fears in that book was not living up to your potential. So question for you then is that potential created from yourself, of what you believe your potential is, or is it the potential that you believe that society has put on you? Or at least what was your frame of mind when you were at least writing that book?
I think it's the third thing. I mean, like, I think that we can create potential for ourselves. And I do think that society can put something on us for what we ought to or should, reach for. But I really have come to believe that the potential that I'm talking about is this idea that we were each uniquely created with a special set of skills. We're Liam Neeson in that way, like that kind of way. Like we have a very special set of skills. And that we have each gone through such unique experiences, some of them good, some of them bad, but all of them unique to us in a way that, unlike any other of the 7 billion people living on the planet or the billions that lived before us, uniquely positions us to unlock those gifts specifically to the intention of a creator who was preordaining for us, that being the thing that we could ultimately go and do. And when you can kind of like stand into that and acknowledge it, oh, I am good at these things. I have passion for these things. I can bring light in these ways, and find a place where those things overlap and coalesce. Now you're cooking with gas, and you can actually feel the day and feel the measure of your impact because of having, every time that you're stuck with a question of what should I do? Oh, I'm going to go back to what are the things that I've been uniquely given? What are the things that I'm uniquely passionate for? What are the experiences that uniquely set me up to handle the circumstances that are sitting in front of me? How can I, with the mandate that in my mind comes from whatever you've been given, give what's been given to people who are desperately in need of it?
So, okay, if you're preordained for this stuff and you've been given a unique set of skills, and I'm with you on this. Like, I firmly believe this in my career. Like, I was successful as an athlete fighting. I grew up my entire life playing American football, didn't find success in that sport. I didn't have the God-given talent that I needed for that. I didn't have like the size, the speed, the explosiveness, but along comes martial arts. This is something I have an exceptional learning curve for it. I have a great work ethic, and I have this useful skill set, obviously a very, very, very refined skill set, and found some success in that. If we've been preordained with these skills, as you've spoken of, then do you still live with like the fear of not living up to your potential? Because if you've been preordained for a purpose and you have the skill set to get it done, what is there to fear?
The fear to me ends up being a catalyst for action. So I actually don't know that fear, like I've described fear historically as something that might be just, seen as negative. But in this instance, I actually see positive. I think it's a healthy thing for us to be connected to the fear of not living up to the measure of what we are on this planet for. The thing I've asked myself maybe more than anything in the last couple of years is, how do I feel about myself when I'm by myself? How do I feel about myself when I'm by myself? And to answer the question of how I'd hope to feel great about myself every time I'm by myself, I went backwards and tried to, for the 5 years previous, identify every time that I felt like I was in a funk, where I had less confidence, I had more shame, I had more guilt, I didn't feel great about myself when I was by myself, to see if there was anything that consistently popped up over those 5 years so that I might be able to preemptively get ahead of something that might get in my way with whatever comes in the future. And there was a single thing every single time that was present when I didn't feel great about myself when I was by myself, when I was in a funk or shame was a part of my story. And that was, I had dissonance. I had this space that existed between this person I knew I could be, right? Like I knew I had these talents. I knew I had these passions. I knew I had this light that I could create for other people because of that light existing inside of myself. And I, on the days when I felt stuck most, was showing up in a way that wasn't actually meeting the things that I can do where they exist. And so anytime that there was that dissonance, that lack of integrity, that space that existed between who I could have been on that day and who I ended up showing up as is where compromised confidence and shame and guilt and imposter syndrome and insecurity festers, grows, and thrives. And so on the days when I could actually create integrity between who I know I ought to be in order to become who I want to become, those are the days that I can sleep very, very well at night, that I feel great for having created integrity between this potential that exists and the work I could do today. And what's interesting about potential, though, is it's not a fixed thing. Because I believe that if you are truly interested in fulfillment, then you're on a pursuit of growth that never, ever ends, which means that your ambition ends up being to just be a little bit better tomorrow than you are today, in a way that doesn't like demean you for not being great already. You are enough, you are whole, you are worthy today, and you're on a journey of becoming. And so the like ability to take all of the potential that exists inside of me and fully actualize it is the mission of life. Like my definition of success is that attempt to create integrity in a way that allows me to continue on this journey of becoming. And every day that I'm able to see just a little bit of progress in my mental, emotional, physical, relational, spiritual health, every day I'm able to see a little bit of progress in the way that I can take my passion and make it even deeper, the way that I can take my skills and get closer to mastery, the way I can focus on impact and get closer to either deeper impact with a small group of people or wider impact with a broader group of people. I feel better about myself. And it's a continuum that never, ever ends. I'm going to keep trying to do it every single day between now and the day I die.
How do you know when you've lived up to the maximum of your potential? You know, I talk about, like, you kind of touched on this, but that dissonance that you talk about, I always tell people that this is the source oftentimes of depression, because you have in your mind, you have this vision of who you are as a person, right? Like in my mind, I'm the guy who helps old ladies across the street. I'm the guy who, you know, I'm always doing the right thing. But then when I suddenly, even something little, like maybe I get into an elevator and I'm running short on time. And I know that somebody's coming for that elevator, but I'm just like, let the door close, you know? And it's like, I'm not like, albeit this is something tiny, right? It's not like I just, like ran over a 2-year-old and didn't tell anybody that this is, but it's me saying like, I'm not living in parallel with how I see myself, right? There's this dissonance that you're talking about. And when that dissonance becomes too big, then that's obviously oftentimes the source of depression. And so then you have this potential, like, but I could see the potentials, like today my potential is here and I need to live up to this potential. But if you don't quite reach that potential, does it still create this feeling of imbalance in your life? Or is it not a quantifiable thing? Or how does that work for you? And the reason why I'm asking is because the mindset of this is a lot like an athlete, right? You, as an athlete, like I come into the gym and I'm going to work on my martial arts. And today I want to work on refining this skill. Now I can get to a certain skill level and I know that tomorrow I'm going to continue refining that skill and I'm going to get better and I'm going to continue getting better, because every day you just don't get, once you get to the point as an athlete where you walk in and you're like, I'm good enough. That's where in life, like that's where you're going to start losing, like from a competitive perspective. And so this potential that you're talking about sets my mindset into this athlete mode of things. And it's how I assess almost everything I do in life. I can't turn that off.
And what's interesting in like the idea of actualizing your potential, the only thing that you can do, the only thing you frankly have control over is how you give maximum effort in a 24-hour period that you can control. You can't change the past. You have no control over the future. You can control how you show up today. What's interesting, though, is that the variables that will be thrown your way may, in fact, alter what it might mean to have maximum impact or maximum utilization of potential on any given day. Because sometimes life's going to be hard and something is going to come and pull the rug out from under you. You might get sick or have someone in your family become sick. You might go through a relationship change, whatever it is. And so part of it is also just arming yourself with just an overwhelming amount of grace for knowing that your definition of what your best looks like on any given day is somewhat a variable thing. That you can't get too hard on yourself if you have given maximum effort when the circumstances of life have, ebbed or flowed in a way that doesn't necessarily allow you to have the same kind of yield or output that you would have had if the conditions were just a little bit easier. But I define it as Did I give my very best? Did I focus my attention on the habits and routines that would set me up for success? Have I thought about what might get in my way so that I can, with any kind of coping mechanism, have a positive one instead of a negative one when it shows up? Am I surrounding myself with the best community so that when I struggle, it's not if I struggle, but when I struggle, I've got people who can receive my declaration of struggle in a way that affirms that I'm normal, but that also might give me a tool or a trick to get out of struggle faster. And like most days, I'm great and I feel great, but there's plenty of days, because it's a nonlinear journey, this journey that we're on of becoming who we'd hope to become, the nonlinear journey of life. You're going to have 5 great days in a row and then have a hard day. And if you're too hard on yourself for not maximizing your potential on the hard day, you'll stay in a hard day for 3 days instead of 1. And so the idea is to be able to be resilient and bounce back as fast as you possibly can, in part because of you acknowledging you did your best on each day. And if your best on that day was only doing a certain amount, have some grace, get back up and go again.
So you got to have the occasional bad day where you're like, you know what, today's just couch and a movie day and I'm not moving off this couch today. I'm sure you have those days. On those days, are you living up to your maximum potential on that day? And you're just saying, you know what, my potential today is just lower because of, for whatever reason,
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's something strange in humanity that has us discounting the importance of self-care or how much a rest day actually affords the ability for the muscle that you've just broken down to build itself back up. And so I am completely fine if the thing I need on a day is to get away, sit in nature, find a way to create some peace, whether it's, like watching something on a screen, but like finding a way to create a judgment-free, shame-free space for self-care is important, because this is a marathon. We're not doing a sprint here in this life. We're doing a marathon. And if you want to be able to actually still be running on mile 25 and 26, you got to be able to stop and refuel.
That's a great analogy, talking about how we're doing a marathon and not a sprint. But I think I actually approach life more like a marathon that I'm running in intervals. Instead, like imagine running a marathon with like 100 meter repeat sprints, right? I'm gonna do 100 meters, then I'm gonna walk 100 meters, then I'm sprint 100 meters. I think that's more how I do life, and I'm that's just a statement of fact, not a suggestion on how you should approach life. I'm not sure it's necessarily the best approach, but so let me ask you this then, Dave. I love asking this of people, like people that are successful in their fields. You talked about habits and routines. Give me habits and routines that you have. Like what's your morning routine like? I have a very specific morning routine for myself. So what is your morning routine to actually set the intention of your day to be a successful day where you're living up to your maximum potential?
Yeah. So I'll answer it a little bit of a long way. The first thing that I have been doing on an every 3-month or so interval is asking the very simple question: what do I need in this season? What do I need in this season for my mental, emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual health? These 5 dimensions of health. What do I need? Because in the last year, I have gone through stuff I've never, ever been through in my life. Transitioning out of having been married, transitioning out of a work environment I used to know, transitioning into some new things that I'm doing for my career, trying to handle what ends up now being 2 houses for my 4 kids. And what I've needed in each of what end up being about 3 to 6 month intervals has just changed as the circumstances of my life have changed. So when I can answer this question, what do I need in this season, against each of those 5 dimensions of health, they are indicating to me the kind of habits and routines I need in this season to show up well. And so I start with answering those questions. For me, and do this or don't, I end up creating 3 things for each of my mental, emotional, physical, relational, and spiritual health, so that I can have my calendar, have my routine, have my habits, have my community, have whatever it ends up being, supporting the 15 or so things I need around these 5 dimensions of health. Once I've answered those questions, then my routine gets built. And so in real time, my routine, given the needs that I have in the season, my morning routine starts the night before. I have to go to bed by a certain time to get a certain amount of sleep, or I am not productive the following day. And so I get my kids to bed on the nights that they're here. I go to bed every night around the same time, and I get up every morning around the same time. Do not hit snooze ever. It's not the way to start the day. Hitting snooze is already negotiating with yourself and a promise that you have made. And in your mind, whether it's conscious or unconscious, it gives you permission to negotiate with yourself about something for the rest of the day. If you've set the alarm at 6, get up at 6. I set the alarm every single morning. It kind of depends on what's happening in life, but 6 o'clock is more or less when I'm getting up. It's about an hour before the kids start to get up. It gives me some time to spend time with myself. The first thing I do, I walk into my closet and put on my workout stuff, because I know every day that body movement is an important part of my routine. I am not going to negotiate with myself. And if I have my clothes on, it's way harder to listen to my excuses than it is to stay focused on and be disciplined to the thing I know I need. Walk into the kitchen and start my coffee. There's 8 minutes of that coffee maker making coffee for me. And in those 8 minutes, I work on my gratitude. Make a list of everything that I can be grateful for the previous 24 hours so that I can start my day primed with an appreciation for goodness in life, even if I'm having a hard day or going through a hard season. I take my coffee and I sit out back on my patio. I've dubbed it the Patio of Peace. I'll listen to some worship music, sometimes just sit in silence. But it's my opportunity to have a conversation with a higher power, God, have some prayer, and just get myself into neutral. I do it intentionally just after I've done my gratitude, because I feel a certain way when I'm able to remember. And it's not like huge things that I'm grateful for. It's these tiny moments that I've been on the hunt for from the previous 24 hours. Hey, I have these things that are good in my life, and now I can represent a little bit of gratitude to my maker and spend some time in peace. Once I'm done with that, I actually open up my calendar for the first time. I want to look now at my day to understand what is happening, and I will prioritize where I need to focus my attention in force-ranked order, with the most important thing first, the least important thing last, so that if I have any kind of motivation fatigue or start getting tired, whatever it might be, I've given my most important thing the first slot on the calendar. I go from there to my pre-workout, have my supplement stack, have a little bit of green juice, have my pre-workout, and I make my way out to the gym. And I will move my body for 30 to 45 minutes, get back inside, and get the kids up for school. But my workout following my having opened up my calendar is intentional, again, in that when I have thought about, this is the sequence of how I need to approach my day, working out for me is also a time for some thinking. And so now I can, while I'm moving my body, think a little bit about how I want to be intentional with what I approach in the day. And it could be intentional in how I'm spending time with the kids and some routine that they have, whether it's a recital at school or some sports event. It could just be business stuff. Oh, I got to write this email, or I got to respond to this person. But whatever it ends up being, I can spend that 45 minutes getting my thoughts right. I come back in, get the kids off to school, shower, and I'm now ready for my day. But I've done it in that sequence in a way that says, yep, body movement's important, prayer is important, gratitude is important, organizing my thoughts so I can be intentional in my day is important. And now I'm able to start my day with something that feels like something of a more solid foundation.
I love how everything that you do there has purpose to it. There's actually, like, it's an efficient morning. There's no wasted motion, no wasted energy. I will say this though, when it comes to my prayer routine, I typically, I'll start my day with prayer. I typically end my day with a prayer of gratitude. And I do that rather than, the typical things that you might pray for, like, man, I pray for my mom's health or something like that, because when I'm done praying, I can get sidetracked into thinking about my mom's health. Right. And that can sometimes like invite this negative energy. So before I go to bed, I like to end my day. I'll do mine opposite with the prayer of gratitude, because I want to end my day with just a clear thought of mind. And you're right. It's not about being thankful for the big things in life. How often we take time to just like, I'm thankful for this air that I can breathe right now. I'm thankful for the ability for my lungs to function properly, particularly in this situation we're in with this pandemic. Like, this is a respiratory issue that we got going on. Like, so it's like these tiny little things that you can be thankful for, things that you take for granted all the time. You don't realize, for example, like, I'm thankful for my toes, and you wouldn't realize that until maybe like you've broken a toe and tried walking on it. And then you're like, man, like, this thing has to support me all day long. And so, but just going back to what I was saying, I really like the fact that everything you've done is purpose driven. My morning routine is a lot like yours, but it doesn't have 15 points. It only has like 3 or 4.
Well, one thing I will say about gratitude, the importance of a gratitude practice every morning is as much a prompt for being on the hunt for what you're going to report on the following day. Because if you start your day writing down what you were observant of the previous day, it acts as a trigger to stay on the hunt for things to be grateful for the day. And if you go into your day looking for these small things to be grateful for, I mean, I already know one of the things I'm writing down tomorrow. I was driving my son to school. We were driving in the Bronco. He rolled down the window and he said, "Oh, I got to say something to Instagram." I was like, "Oh, okay." Like, it doesn't happen that often. He's 9. So I gave him my phone and he was like, "Hi, everybody. I'm going to school. And I just want to make sure that you know to roll down the windows and just like appreciate the fresh air." And I said, "Man, you are a good dude." And immediately he said, "I know I am." And I was like, okay, this will be at the top of my list for gratitude tomorrow. One, that you have this appreciation to just like indulge in a little moment of fresh air on a drive, but that also I could do a prompt like, "You're a good dude." And you have this immediate knee jerk without any hesitation reaction of knowing that you are. All right, that's going at the top of the list. And I'm going to spend the rest of my day looking for, okay, what other small things like this conversation will be one of the things that I have gratitude for. Because I got just to hang out with somebody who's a good person, have a good conversation. It's awesome.
Well, okay, hold on. Asking about routines then. This is a complex routine. Do you have a routine that's that complex at night, like an intentional, purpose-driven routine that you end your day with?
I mean, it's now become like two-pronged. When I have the kids, when I don't have the kids. When I have the kids, we have a very specific, it steps through, we're going to sit down and have a meal together. You're going to get a small window of technology time while I probably prepare myself for bed. And then after the tech time is done, we're going to sit in the family room and watch a show together. And so we've been making our way through Lost. Don't tell them about the finale. We're making our way through.
What season are you on in Lost?
We're only in the second season, so they have no idea.
Wow,
how
man,
much
you got
more.
plenty. You got way. Yeah, you could conference.
It's honestly probably 2 years from now that we'll actually get to the end. But that, like, as a routine, right? I get my daughter down because she's only 4 around 7:30. The boys and I then have this window from 7:30 to 9. They go down, and then I tend to go no tech, try and read for about a half hour's worth of time, and then by like 9:30, I got to be asleep. And so I go to bed about around the same time as my boys do each night. And that ends up being a routine. Like, yeah, I'm going to get my prayers in. I'm going to have, but truly it's, can I spend a little time in a book? Can I find a way to slowly ease into my evening and my sleep in a way that doesn't have me feeling overwhelmed in any way by, too much stimulation, too much tech, too much this, too much that. And the time that I spend with my kids is like a super important part of it.
You know what, Dave, you talked about like all the changes that you've gone through in life and stuff like that. Like, talk to me about, cause as I was reading your book, I was just thinking about you, your headspace and all that kind of stuff, because you were writing this book at a time where like was things beginning to go wrong with like in the marriage between you and Rachel? Like, did you know that this was coming up, or was this something that came out of left field? Like, what was that like dealing with? Because the entire brand that you guys built was kind of built on relationships and, having successful relationships. And you talk a lot about it in the book that you wrote. And so just like wondering like how that all came about and how you dealt with that, because you mentioned like having to deal with these struggles just now.
Yeah. I mean, I think I wrote the book in an environment where we were still working through the best we could, the things that any couple end up going through. And so I think the stuff that you find in the book is representative of two people trying to the best they can figure out how to work well together. We were making this choice I'd left my job at Disney for us to go work together. Working together was hard. I mean, it was a very, very difficult thing. And the things that we were trying to figure out in our relationship, I think somewhat are reflected, but weren't written with me having an appreciation of where we were necessarily heading. The decision to not be married anymore was something that ended up coming together without a ton of conversation. And the fact that it happened was more a surprise, frankly, to me, though I can a year after this conversation took place. I have a lot of gratitude for this being the right thing, even if it wasn't something that I would have necessarily arrived at myself. And so it's interesting because I know, like, in our business, right, we had this podcast where we were very open about the things that we were working on, and it was framed inside of this like relationship moniker, but it was an attempt to represent to people that, man, we're trying our best to show you how we are working through the things that are challenges inside of our marriage. And maybe with the perspective of, oh, knowing now that you guys got divorced, if I were to listen to this stuff, would I be able to see some things that were signs? I think you would, because we were talking quite a bit about the things we were trying to figure out and work through in our own relationship. And yet, the transition was something that I think was somewhat of a surprise for both of us, because we came to this realization like, oh, we are better off in friendship and in partnership in other ways, but not in marriage. And there is going to be abundance that is created for you and for me if we make this decision. And as much as, man, I really couldn't see it at the very beginning, I am living it in real time, and I'm so appreciative for it. And if there's anything, like I have this regular coaching thing that I do inside of this platform called Growth Day. And the subject for this next month, each of the 12 teachers is talking on some component of relationship. And I'm like, man, I have had the benefit now of this last year of trying to diagnose where I could have seen things better, would have maybe appreciated what was happening in real time in a way that I just didn't see in real time. But as I'm thinking of like, well, what am I going to coach on? I'm like, I think I'm going to coach on, I am, going to perpetually and forever be in a journey of trying to better understand how to show up in a relationship. And I hope that I never represent that I've got it figured out. If there was a time where it felt like I had it figured out, I wish I could go back and shake that person, because I think I was operating in some ways in this conceit that I would always be married forever and ever, because I just thought that I would be married forever and ever. I thought we were just going to kind of struggle and work to figure it out for the rest of our lives, and it didn't work out that way. And so here I am now trying to figure out, okay, in the next relationship that I have and how I try to show up well and create intimacy with anybody in any relationship, are the things I can learn from what didn't work as well in a beautiful partnership. We had an amazing triumph of a marriage in so many respects, and yet we're also better off not being married, and that's okay. I'm trying to hold both of those things at the same time.
In reading your book, you didn't sound like the kind of person that had everything figured out. As a matter of fact, you sounded completely opposite. You sound like every time life faced you with some sort of challenge, you're like, I have no clue what I'm doing here. And there was a lot of I have no clue what I'm doing here. And maybe my ego is a bit that I don't want to admit that. And now I had to learn how to work through that. And I've also learned how to make adjustments. It was constantly you figuring out how to make adjustments in your life, always making adjustments in your life to become better. So anyway, that was kind of the overtone of the book as I was reading. Okay, in hindsight, if you're reading it on the back end of knowing, as opposed to on the forefront of, not knowing that you guys ended up divorced, you talk about being present and stuff like that. There were, in your book, clearly there were some times in your relationship, and you talk about this as a father and all that kind of stuff, of not being present. And, obviously we've talked about doing things with intention in your life. And now, just as an example, the body transformation that you've gone through and clearly being present in your life. You've talked about drinking in the past and how that was something that you've dealt with, maybe a little bit of depression on top of that. Talk to me about this transformation of going through this, the physical transformation and everything else that comes with it.
I made this proclamation at a holiday party in 2019 that 2020 was going to be my best year ever. I just was certain that at 45, I'm going to have my best year. First time a book's coming out, first time I'm going to be coaching, first time that I'm going to be hosting a podcast, first time for a whole host of things. And I'm like, man, it's going to be a great year. And what ended up happening was, I did have my book and the coaching, and I did host a podcast for the first time, but the conditions inside of which I might have my best year were wildly beyond anything that I was able to control. And I did, as it turns out, year comes and goes. It's the year that collectively we all experience everything we did with pandemic and racial reconciliation and all sorts of insane, just crazy things that were happening inside of the world. And I also happened to get divorced. And it was the best year of my life, in part because it was the hardest year of my life. And what I've come to appreciate is that I can hold these two things at the same time. The hard was what produced the good. That it wasn't in spite of these conditions, but because of them, that I was brought to my knees and had my faith tested and ended up having it become stronger. I was forced to really deal with, why am I thinking what I'm thinking or feeling what I'm feeling when it comes to my mental and emotional health, and spent more time with therapists and more time with friends and more time in books to really dive into why I am the way I am, why I'm wired the way I am, why I feel the things I do, what my emotions end up meaning, who I am as self, and how I have a relationship as self with these parts that show up as thoughts or feelings. And in that, those things, like that work, the work inside of my spiritual life, inside of my mental and emotional health, getting those things in a good place acted as an opportunity then to focus on the way that I physically was feeling. Now, my physical transformation in part was I didn't want to pick up a bottle and have a drink as a way to mute the feelings that I was feeling, because I wanted to get maximum benefit out of terribly ridiculous stuff. I didn't want to not get the most out of the hardest season that I was going through. And so I put on my shoes and I started running. I mean, the first 2 months of the divorce, I ran 200 miles a month, each of those first 2 months. And running 10 miles in the morning and then maybe running 5 or 6 miles at night was a way for me to process my emotions. That time on the road was therapy in church. And I was able to think and understand what I was thinking and feeling in a way that I wouldn't have otherwise. Once I got through the kind of the running phase, and I started to really get a handle on why I was feeling what I was feeling and why I was thinking what I was, getting into the gym and lifting became something that was also just like an outlet for when I was feeling frustrated, emotions like anger or sadness. Getting in and lifting for 30 or 45 minutes was this amazing cathartic expression of my emotion in a way that was also making me feel stronger. And so it was just, I think, a combination of all those things that had me attempting every day to make good come out of hard. And the way that I was able to see this connection between body movement and processing emotion, or pushing myself to do something physical to reframe what I believed myself to be capable of in how strong I could be. All of it just was something that just stacked on top of each other. And now I look back on this year, I don't want to repeat the year necessarily, because man, I had a Cal Ripken-esque streak of crying days in a row. I mean, trust me, it was a hard year. I don't want to repeat it, but I'm so grateful for it, because I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that the person that I will look back on at 85 of who I've become was born in 2020, that like this 45, 46-year-old version of me and the circumstances that I've gone through in this last year are the table setter and the foundation for every great thing that's going to happen for the balance of my life. So I can be happy for it too.
Well, it's classic pressure test, right? I mean, pressure is what turns coal into diamonds. And so you talk about like, nobody wants to go through struggles. I don't wake up and say, well, I actually wrote this on my mirror one time. I said, thank you, God, for all the trials and tribulations you give me in my life, because it's what separates me from the ordinary man. No ordinary men crumble in times of tribulation. And I take dry erase markers and I'll write things on my mirror. And that's one of the things that I wrote on my mirror, particularly when I was going through a rough time. But it's those struggles in life. I mean, obviously, and you talk about this in your book, and it's just a known thing. It's the struggles that make you grow, right? You go into the gym and you talk about weightlifting. You want to put resistance. You need to put some resistance on a muscle. You need to make that muscle struggle in order to make it grow. It's necessary to struggle to grow, and whether you want to grow spiritually, emotionally, physically, whatever this growth is, like you have to go through these struggles. And so oddly enough, we live in this life where we almost have to live this balance of like inviting struggle into our life while simultaneously not really wanting the struggle to come into our life, because if you want to grow, you have to go through that stuff.
Yeah. Oh, people talk about post-traumatic stress, and I don't want to discount it at all, but post-traumatic growth is profound. And if you can see an ability to grow from the thing that you're going through, it might in some cases make it feel a little bit worth the the struggle in the first place.
Well, okay, let's talk a little bit like your success and your physical transformation here, right? What, like nutritionally, what have you done? And I guess like physically, what are you doing? Like you talk about moving 30 to 45 minutes a day. Like what does that entail for you during the week? Like what's your routine look like and your nutritional routine? I know you mentioned a green drink earlier. I'm a green drink guy. Every morning, as a matter of fact, I have my green drink every morning and every afternoon. But so I'll be interested in hearing your recipe, what you do and stuff like that. So break it down for me, man.
Well, the first thing I did, and I'm fortunate to be able to have done this, I met with a nutritionist just to like actually help me understand the way that body and food interact. Because I always just thought, oh, well, I can just do this diet, or I will eat less, or I will eat more frequently. But I never had somebody helping track what I was doing with the way it affected my body. So I met with someone, did a little blood test that helped me understand the way that my body processes carbs, fats, and proteins, and helped me understand, oh, you're someone who actually needs to have twice as many proteins, a little bit of fat, a little bit of carbs, and ended up helping.
So hold on, what's your
meal plan?
What's your split on your macros then? You do like a,
it's like 2/3 proteins, then no, 50% proteins, and then
25% carbs.
25 protein. Yeah, sorry, 50% proteins, 25 carbs, 25 fats. But even that, it's more carbs than it is fats. I got to look and see. The bottom line is I got a meal plan. And it was basically, you need to eat 8 times a day.
Oh.
I was like, I need to eat 8 times a day. What are you talking about? And so like,
because eating becomes your job in this, right? I mean, like,
oh yeah, no, I am just eating all the time. That's all I do is eat.
I live this life, man. This is why I still, like, people will look at me and be like, man, are you coming out of retirement? Because like I live this life, but I don't eat 8 times a day. Typically I'm getting in about 6 meals a day, but that in itself, you're eating every 2.5 hours, and I'm eating full meals.
Every 2.5 hours I'm eating. And it's basically like, all right, I'm having a cup of oatmeal, half cup of berries, banana, and almond butter. Then I'm going to work out. Then I'm coming out and having a protein shake, which is like almost like meal replacement whey protein. And then I'm a couple of hours later having an apple and some almond butter. And then at lunch, I'm having palm-sized chicken with a little bit of rice and some broccoli. And then 2 hours later, it's another like a handful of almonds, and but like that kind of thing where it's just like I am always every 2 hours putting something into my body to maintain a metabolism that helps burn, but has the consideration for how much protein, how much fat, how much carbs I end up needing, and am drinking almost 2 gallons of water a day, a little less than 2 gallons of water a day. And which by the way, like is just like keeping me running at a rate that, yes, I got to go to the bathroom all the time.
How many times you get up and pee at night?
Well, here's the crazy thing is I know what my water target is, and I will try and get the entire water target for the day done by 2 p.m.
I do the same
because
thing,
I'm just
man.
like, I can't.
But you know that you're not supposed to do that, right?
I know I'm not supposed to do it.
You're not supposed to front load that water. Yeah, like, but I would still do. I do the same thing unless if I have a heavy sweating day. I mean, because right now I'm down here in the tropical weather, right? So it's 90 degrees and 90+% humidity every single day. So if I go outside and run, I may as well have just like jumped in a pool because I'm that sweaty within 5 minutes. So I'm losing a ton of water. So I'm constantly drinking water. Now on a day like that, I might drink 2 gallons of water a day, but typically, I'm maybe like on just a normal day, I'm like a gallon of water is plenty for me. Cause with taking that much water, are you also taking in a lot of electrolytes, like extra sodiums and potassium and stuff like that? Cause you can strip your system.
I am, but I'm training for an Ironman that has been pushed because of COVID a couple of different times. So I have a triathlon as a warm up in July. Here we are recording this on May 20th. So I'm on a bike, in the pool, or running every other day. I mean, so, and in Texas, May 20th is basically the beginning of it becoming 100 degrees. And so I'm now getting into a window where I'm going to be training in, 90 to 100 degree heat. I'm going to be sweating a ton. So I've got an electrolyte mix. I've got a BCA mix, but like something that will help replenish anything that I end up burning off. But and then to answer the other part of the question, my everyday workout it's all over the board. I'd love to say that there's some kind of consistent plan, but I'm in real time doing a community challenge where we're just encouraging people that are part of our online community to move for 30 to 45 minutes. I have a neighbor down the street who's a little earlier on in his fitness journey. And so we've been doing like Tabata, which is a little more like 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 8 times for each of 5 exercises. And we're doing 30 minutes of movement. But then in spending time with Heidi is much more about weights and lifting, and has, as a person with her pro card, and like knows all of the dynamics of what it means to actually like really put muscle on your body. When we do a workout, it's a completely different thing where we're doing 15 reps of heavy weights 4 times in a way that just like fatigues the muscle, but that also is helping me build muscle. So I'm kind of interval-ish training in that one day is a super heavy lifting day, and the next day is a little more of a aerobic-esque Tabata style workout. But but the fact that it's every day is great. And then on top of it, I'm laying in some running, some biking, and some swimming so that I can be ready for the triathlon.
How many calories a day are you eating? About?
Shoot, I wish I could tell you. I don't know. I'm going to guess it's like 4,000, but I don't know.
Yeah, because I mean, that's what I was wondering, because the reason why I ask is because when you're talking about these kind of workouts, like, time and intensity when you're working out are inversely proportional, right? Obviously, the more intense a workout is, the less time you have to spend doing it, because you can just trash yourself. It's kind of like the cheetah mentality. I always tell people that if I could pick an animal that represented me, it would be a cheetah, because I live my life. And this is me going back to the running a marathon and 100-meter interval repeats.
Intervals, yeah.
Because I'm like a cheetah. Like, not that I'm fast like a cheetah, but I live my life at like full speed. And then it's like in intervals, but then I just want to lay around in the tree the rest of the day. You know what I mean? Like, I'm going to put full output, but then when I'm not outputting, it's like, that's why I don't like doing things like walking places, especially for like, people say, oh, well, let's walk over there. I'm like, no, I don't want to walk. It's like, because if I'm exercising, it's too slow. And if it's transportation, it's too slow. I can walk for an hour, I can run for 20 minutes and pretty much, accomplish the same thing. But either way, with the output that you're doing, like, you would have to eat a lot of calories, because I'm probably I don't track my calories, but kind of somewhat mentally I do, because I've done that in the past. And I know I'm north of 4,000 calories, somewhere between 4 and 4,500. And it's crazy, because people don't realize, like, that's what you have to do, whether you want to be fit, whether you want to put on muscle, if you want to lose muscle. I helped one of my colleagues at work helped her lose some weight. And I assessed her nutrition and assessed her working out. I'm like, look, you're overtraining. So I cut the amount of working out that she did in a week by like 30%, if not more, 40% of her physical activity. And I almost doubled her calories. And she looked at me like, what are you doing? And I'm like, just trust me. I'm like, you might have a few days where your weight bumps up and you put on a kg or something like that, because we're on this side of the world where we use the metric system. So you might put on a kg, but relax, don't panic, stick to the plan. And she did exactly that. And it dropped off almost immediately. And within, she lost a ton of weight. Looks amazing. But, when I told her that to work out less and eat more, but going back to like your morning, everything has to have intention. Everything has to be purposeful. So on your body,
well, it's interesting. I will say this though, in the midst of this training, when I'm doing the heavier lifting days and I feel hungry and it's like in between a window where I'm like meant to eat, I'll have a shake. It's like, because I can't eat enough right now when I'm moving as much as I am, and I feel just fine about it. Thank you very much. And to be honest, I don't spend a second looking at a scale. Every day I'm tracking on a 1 to 10 scale, my mood and my energy. And like those two things, I mean, like I like to look in the mirror and make sure that like, I'm seeing results, but like has very little to do with the scale, and more like, how do I feel? And can I connect how body movement or something I did in terms of fueling my body changed the way that I had energy for the day or had a mood for the day? Because if I can isolate those things, those are more important than, am I at 226 or 221 or, like whatever. It doesn't matter to me.
So just rough estimates. Where did you drop from what to what?
I was up over 240, and I came down. I mean, at a certain point in the last year, I was down to like 195. Okay. I'm back up now because of, I've been bulking a little bit for the training of it all. I'm back closer to 220 right now, but I'm still probably 25 pounds lighter than I was, and have completely shifted the composition of what that weight is. Because
Yeah,
that
for sure.
weight was a lot of fat. This is a lot more muscle. And I feel
your BMI is completely
great.
changed.
Yeah.
But man, I mean, if you're like, how does that affecting you doing, like looking at doing like marathons and triathlons and Ironmans and stuff like that? Because 220 is not exactly an ideal weight for, I mean, but you're pretty tall. What are you, 6'3"?
I'm 6'4" though.
6'4".
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
6'4". So like, could I get, I mean, like my target weight at a certain point for the Ironman was 205. And I got down there. And to be honest, I didn't have the strength after, like I would do a 20-mile run, which is a lot of running. I would do a 20-mile run. And I was just like, yo, I am feeling so tired that I don't know that I can get back up and like do anything for 3 days. So there was something about having just a little bit more weight. Also at 6'4" with my frame, the difference between 205 and 220 isn't that much when it's dispersed across so much height that I don't know. I actually feel strong right now in a way that's like, come at me, bro. I'm ready. I'm ready for it. So I'm good. Now check on me after I do this triathlon. You know, like I've done a marathon. I had this amazing experience climbing a mountain. Each of those experiences reframed what I believe myself to be capable of. And the whole idea of doing the triathlon or the Ironman is to reframe what I think myself to be capable of. In the middle of that swim, I mean, like swimming for me is definitely not my love language. This is not a thing that I am proficient at. And at 220, trust me, is not a thing. I'm not floating in the water.
Yeah. Oh no, I know. I swim like a stone. Same.
Yeah.
I know the feeling. And I'll say this about swimming. Swimming is the one sport. It's like, for me, like I'm not a great swimmer because it's the one sport where you can't breathe when you want to. When you're running, you can just take a breath anytime you want, right? I mean, basically. Yeah. But swimming, like your head is underwater if you're trying to be efficient, and you're doing open water swimming, which is a completely different thing. But it's like you have to be selective with your breaths. And it's like if you start getting out of air, you can't say, "Man, I'm out of air. I'll just take a breath now." No, it has to line up with that stroke and all that kind of stuff. So swimming's not my strong suit either. I'm just too much muscle mass for me to be a good swimmer.
People have asked, what's your time goal? And I'm like, my time goal is not drowning.
Yeah.
That's it. Like, I just want to get to the end of the swim. I feel really great about the bike, and I feel even better about the run. But come on.
So let me ask you this. Are you writing a nutritional book then, or a training book? Like, are you planning on something like that in your future?
I don't know. What's interesting is I've been in a relationship now with this person, Heidi Lane, and she comes out of body transformation and bodybuilding and in like is an expert inside of nutrition. And I've actually said to her, yo, I really am into this world in part because I have never been really into this world, and that I'm seeing transformation and it's affecting the way that I feel. And I feel stronger and better about myself because of diving into it. I'm open to, frankly, anything that might be an opportunity to pour into people. I think I'd probably do it if I were to, as someone who has very little experience and has seen short-term like exposure to it having massive impact in life. And so if I were to partner with someone who actually could speak to the nutrition in a way that is smarter, or like we were working out yesterday, and I've been like each day putting in my stories, hey, here's the workout of the day. And we were doing some flies for rear delts. And I'm like, I don't know what a delt is. So can I just describe it as a shoulder? What are we talking about? She's like, just say it's rear delts. And then in parentheses, say shoulders. But like, that's where I'm at. I'm like a neophyte in all of this. And yet I love it so much because I'm seeing a way that it can transform not just my body, but my mind in such a powerful way that I know it's going to be a big part of who I am going forward.
Well, listen, you know what, if you wrote a workout book, you probably would resonate with an audience who otherwise would not know, like, oh, those are called delts. Like, yeah, I didn't know that either. So apparently that's what they're called. All right, listen, you know, I read your first book, Get Out of Your Own Way. But the book that you just released, Built Through Courage, I haven't read that one yet. So sell me on it why I need to read this book.
It's not even out yet. So good news, you're not behind. It doesn't come out till October. So we have time. But this is the attempt to encourage the person who is clinging to their comfort zone, who is even if they're suffering, right? Like familiar with that suffering that exists, and they're unwilling to necessarily part with that suffering for the fear of what doing something new might mean, that it might be a permission slip in some ways to pursue the unlocking of your potential, listening to your intuition, honoring the intention of your creator, and leaving your safe harbor, traversing through the mode of fear that surrounds that safe harbor so that you might learn and ultimately grow. I fully 100% believe, I said it in the last book, I say it in the next book, that if you are not growing, you are dying. And that if you are interested in a feeling of fulfillment, if you want to like connect more to your purpose, it can only take place in a posture of growth. And so the whole entire book, it's just all about, hey, like really have a very serious conversation about where you are, set a clear vision for where you'd like to go, and then understand what it's going to take to get there. It's going to take confronting your fear, reframing failure, surrounding yourself with the right people, doing the work. But that's what it's all about. Built Through Courage is what it's called. It comes out October 26th. So I'm excited for you to read it. I love my last book. I love this book a lot more.
You've sold me on reading the book, but out of spite, if I'm not number one on your gratitude list tomorrow, I'm not getting the book. Yeah. So I'm
done.
I'm telling you right now, it's just that simple. So listen, I appreciate you coming on. How can people follow you on Instagram? Because I'll be following you right after this.
Right on. So I spend a ton of time on Instagram. Mr. Dave Hollis is the profile. I'm Dave Hollis on Facebook. I do have a podcast called Rise Together every Thursday, new episode, trying to bring people in who've maybe had a little bit of a different life experience so that we might, through walking in their shoes, have a little empathy for people who might live a little bit differently than us. So that's the best place to check me out.
Listen, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks so much. Had an amazing conversation with you, man. Had a really good time tonight. So thank you so much, Dave.
Right on, Rich. I appreciate you too. Keep doing what you do. And let me know when this comes out so I can tell people about it.
Take care, bro.
All right. Bye-bye.
Quite Franklin is providing this podcast as a public service, but it is neither a legal interpretation nor legal advice, nor a statement of Quite Franklin policy. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation of that product or entity by Rich Franklin or Quite Franklin. The views expressed by guests on the podcast are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. Views and opinions expressed by Quite Franklin employees or representatives are the views and opinions of the persons expressing them, and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Quite Franklin or any of its officials or principals. Nothing heard on this podcast at any time is medical advice or is intended as medical advice. The listener must always consult his or her personal physician or other qualified medical professional regarding any questions of a medical nature. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact our general counsel.